Cool. And Toby's in the attendee list if someone can get that. I will grab the link to the live stream and say hello. And we'll get things started. Thanks everyone for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Today's the 12th of April in the year 2022. And I will drop the minutes in the chat again for folks. You can help take notes, that'd be great. Add yourself to the list and we'll get things started. How about we start with any announcements?
Quickly, OpenJS World, we just published the schedule a few days ago. That's kind of the start of the schedule. We're still booking out another section of our venue with a lot of project maintainers and other folks. But you'll see most of our keynotes are up, our breakout sessions are up. So thanks to everyone who submitted CFPs. That was really hard for our program committee. We had just a ton of great submissions. What else? Oh, early bird pricing. We extended through April 15th. Initially it was the 8th, but we extended it since we got our schedule up a little late. So be sure to check out the early bird pricing. You'll save a couple $100 if you're buying at the corporate rate. And we also have a room block that goes through about mid-May for special prices for hotel. So check the travel tab of that. So I think that's all I have today.
Hi.
Jory, I don't know if you have anything else.
Just a reminder out there to our project community, we had sent some emails around about nominations for a couple of awesome awards we're looking to recognize. Also those opportunities that Robin mentioned to speak and participate at OpenJS World. You know, there's a CPC board director's election that we're running. So just some different housekeeping items that should be in your inbox. And speaking of your inboxes, don't forget to update your email address. If you leave employment one place, we need to make sure that we've got your you know, a personal Gmail or your new spot. Have run into a couple of maintainers who changed email addresses and didn't get those messages. So just friendly reminder to update that as well.
Okay. Cool.
I think I might as well mention that message format has managed to take a step along its path of planned obsolescence, shall we say, by getting the input.message format proposal accepted at least as a stage 1 proposal by DC39. The idea is that we get effectively message format into JavaScript and the library itself becomes a polyfill for it. And then eventually we don't even need the polyfill and we can just close the project. It will take a couple of years for all that to happen.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yep.
That's great news.
Mhm.
Cool. When I open the PR to put this the meeting minutes in, Emily, maybe you can just add a little bit of the detail. I didn't catch all of it in the notes here.
Sure, will do.
Great, thank you. Rock and roll. Anything else before we move into the agenda? If not, Jory touched on this first item in her comments that the CPC primary board seat election is open, or at least open for nominations. Call for nominations is open. I'm looking at the instructions here. The details doesn't necessarily say how long we'll have the call for nominations until April 15th. Okay, so Friday we'll close and then we'll put forward the ballots to the CPC members via open vote per the instructions in the charter. Cool. So anything to add here other than, you know, I know Toby had some good comments and Michael as well about you know, whether people should stay on for more than one term. I don't know if we want to discuss that here now or any other aspects?
Question, just to verify, Jory, it's the Google form, correct? Do we also have, I know last time we had an issue open. Do we have an issue open as well? I can always look too.
There is an issue that announced the nomination, that the nomination period is open. And, you know, any candidate who'd like to sort of publicly disclose their candidacy and add a statement or two about why is so welcome to either, you know, add a comment to that issue or to open their own issue. But yes, there, I think it's issue 859.
Cool, thank you.
Yep, and I imagine we'll announce nominations soon after it closes, and you know that could be an opportunity to comment as well, whether you want to wait or not. Anyone, that is. Cool. Anything else on this item, or shall we move on?
Can we have a conversation when nominations are in about what I suggested talking about in that thread? Would that be a good time then?
Sorry, what's the question, Toby?
Once nominations are in, can we have a conversation then about what I essentially what I brought up in that thread? The point I'm trying to make is I think it's important that we not only think about who would like to see, but also of having the CPC represented sort of like long time in the board and making choices that make sense from that perspective. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. I find it kind of weird that if someone, you know, started doing one term and wants to do a second term, even that we should be re-voting that person, and to me it's even that is kind of weird. So I don't know if now is a good time to have this conversation, but I think we should be more intentional as a group as to what those seats are for, and make sure that there is continuity and representation the CPC has on the board, because we're also representing the community in the board. And I think it's important that people are there for a reasonable amount of time, and not just time enough to learn what's going on and then move on, right? And of course, like the other part of that is to make sure that there's a limit to how long someone stays, so we're sure to have like fresh folks coming in. So, I mean, elections are great, but I'm just wondering if they make a lot of sense, like at every step of this.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jory.
I was going to say, I think the conversation about term limits and the problem that term limits may or may not solve is worth having after the elections for that we need to run are over, because you know we do have those things live, and I would hate for us to put that cart before the horse that we need to run.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Jory. Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with both Toby and Jory. I think that maybe revisiting the term limits might be a good thing to do. Also the term length too. Like I think what I'm hearing from Toby, which I think is a good point, is like a year, you kind of have enough time to get context and like how to be effective. And then if maybe the answer is extending the length of a term and then imposing limits. But yeah, probably after this election makes sense, because we don't want to be that group that extends our own term limits in the middle of our terms.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we should have both those discussions.
Yep. So for context for everybody, so this is Sarah's seat that's live. Michael's seat is up for re-election in July. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so let's just we'll start that conversation after we get through this this election. Sounds good. Cool. With that, unless there's more that folks want to discuss, then we can move on. And if so, the next item on the agenda is issue 826, the focus on JavaScript security at OpenJS. Nothing really new here. I have been swamped with life and work, so I have not been able to do anything. I know, Robin graciously drafted something for starting the collab space around security. So I'm hoping in the next week, my near future starts to get a little less stressful. So so I'm happy to try and focus on this in the coming days as well. So I don't have any updates, but if anybody has any comments or things they want to add, you're welcome to.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and maybe add some color to this, because folks may not be familiar with with the goal here. So we have obviously a big sort of shared invested interest in improving security of our open source projects. There is a new security foundation at the Linux Foundation called the OpenSSF, through which there are lots of potential opportunities to partner and borrow, best practices and things from. That is that particular group is a high level cross-language, ecosystem sort of focus, and obviously they care a lot about JavaScript. We need to maybe have a space within the OpenJS Foundation where our experts can meet and convene and discuss, and then go bring the problems and challenges that are unique to us to those forums, of which there are several that present opportunities for us to get involved, to help our projects improve their security posture. Because fun fact, of the top 100 most critical JS projects, something like 2/3 of our projects are in that top 100 list, and that's pretty cool, and also very important. So that's just the extra I wanted to add. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jory. And I'll add too that there is work that's happening. I don't want to say behind the scenes, but there's stuff. There is movement that's going on. I'm just in terms of formalizing a collab space. I'm hoping that we can move forward on that soon. So
Yeah, and just a message. I know that Laron weighed in. So when we do a collab space, we'll be sensitive to time zones and make sure if you're a security expert in particular that we're going to accommodate anyone who wants to participate. So that'd be good.
Yeah.
And then we are pretty lucky that we have shared resources with the Linux Foundation. Jory is one, so she supports OpenSSF, and Jordan sits on the board of OpenSSF. So it's really good to kind of have those bridges as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So yeah, hopefully more on this one in our next official meeting. It's definitely top of mind for me. Cool. Moving on, the next item is the license check support and tooling. I don't know if there's any updates on this from.
Yeah, I connected with Shubra yesterday. He was going to drop an update in the issue. It sounds like their engineers have connected with Jordan a couple of times, but they are close to having a wireframe. They also just did their homework just to make sure that any sort of existing solutions would be better. It doesn't sound like they are, but we had a good meeting with Jordan and that team. So Shubra said he'll drop a more formal update. He was hoping end of day today because he's looking for some more information just to kind of wrap things up. But once they have that wireframe, I've been told we can have it like a early version in a month. So we'll see.
Okay, great. That's good news. Cool. Moving on then, the next item is clarify requirements around COC violation. I feel like I saw some movement in this general area recently, but I can't remember what exactly it was. I don't know if you have any updates, Toby, and I see Emily.
No, I don't.
Yeah, so I'm the one who added the label here. And the
Oh no, that's a different thing.
oh,
Amy,
sorry,
I think.
never mind.
I think Joe was mentioning that the thing that I'm super late in finishing. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I was only paying half attention.
Oh, yeah, no, the issue 786, which is clarify requirements around COC violation. And I think I was confusing something with, Emily had landed some things in the last few days. But
So we're all confused.
the agenda item is issue 786, clarify requirements around COC violation.
Yeah, so there are no updates on this.
Okay.
I think, and you saw it on code of conduct, there's a lot in a pull request too. I spent some time in the last week just really digging through everything. I think we have all of the pieces. I just think that we just need to work on the process and some documentation, and probably worth one of our working group meetings just to kind of just crank that out. But I do feel like we're pretty close, at least for the near term, unless the contributor covenant changes dramatically, which it may through the industry. So, but I spent some time on the contributor covenant as well. So there's a lot of interesting work taking place, a lot of encouraging to take that and develop a process that works best for your organization. So, yeah, I think we can do some more work there.
I don't want to get out of sort of
issue sync, and I know we'll probably go to that, but
well, what I'm thinking about is our working meetings, and I guess we can save that conversation for after we get through the agenda items. But we didn't have anything last week. We don't have anything on the calendar for next week, so let's think about that, and we can talk about it once we get through the agenda.
Cool.
Great. So we got a couple of items outside of the CPC repo. The first one is from the tech strategy, add initial section on how OpenJS helps projects. Opening this sucker up. This is pull request 4. This was opened almost 2 weeks ago. Michael, you opened it. I know we had some conversation here. You're on mute, Michael, if you, well, maybe you're even chewing, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. Yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, I opened it. And, I think you'd had the discussion. So it sounded like on the foundation side, we were on board. It'd be nice to get it landed as the first thing we've documented clearly in terms of, one of the areas that were the foundation providing project support.
Yeah, and if folks haven't seen this yet, and it is in the tech strategy repo, this is something we've been talking about, particularly on the Node.js side, about trying to help share news and important updates and things like that. So this is sort of an initial step to allow folks to raise, items that think should be promoted.
Yeah, and based on the tech strategy, what I'd love is that we have a really easy answer to like, how do we support the projects? We can come back here and here's a whole list of things that are concrete things that the foundation does to support that. So this is kind of like a new one that came up, but I think it's a good example of if we actually document it here, it'll help us in putting together that story and talking to projects as to why how does the foundation benefit them in particular.
Yeah. Cool.
So there was some discussion on this one on like timing. I don't think that matters to me in terms of landing this. I think it's like, does this reflect what we're going to do? If so, let's land it. And if it's going to happen a month from now, that's not a big deal one way or the other, right? If it's 6 months to a year, maybe we don't want to say we're doing something that long, that far out, but a month is not.
We have I think we have the pieces. It's just putting it together in a thorough presentation for high level, and then the further documentation. And we also regularly update member information as well. So we need to do another rev of that. We're just, it's just like a really busy news month, which is amazing. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, great. If anybody has any other comments on this, feel free to speak up, but otherwise, I recommend folks take a look and, see how it looks to them and put their thumb on it or whatnot. Cool. I'm looking forward to that. And then the last item on the agenda is from the community fund. This is add details of yearly awards program. This is pull request 11. Michael, you open this.
Yeah, I opened this. I mean, basically, we had a discussion. It was in our working session. This is our documentation for what we, I think, are already doing. So it would be good if we document it before the first time we give them out. So again, people could look at it and give approvals. We could get it landed as, you know, a nice addition again to that tech strategy that you can go to. Or actually, sorry, that's not the tech strategy. In this case, it's the community fund in the documentation for how we're using the community fund in terms of how you apply all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
We updated some of the language for the awards. So Jory and I think, Jory, you have a different doc that sort of tracks some of that language that we've updated. So
Yeah, so the language that shipped on the nomination form alters slightly, but I mean, the spirit is exactly the same. So I can update Michael's PR with the current and then assuming there's no questions or clarifications after a week, just hit the old merge button. We are just hijacking this briefly to re-encourage everyone to submit a nomination. Nominations are going to be open through the end of the month, and we've got 6 different awards areas that we're nominating for. And just to be really clear, these do not have to be people from our projects specifically. They can certainly exist and make a big impact from outside OpenJS projects specifically, but rather, you know, they're serving the JavaScript ecosystem, which is the community that we endeavor to serve. So any questions on the program implementation this go around? If you don't see the answers in the docs, let us know, and then we will try and make sure that gets reflected in the docs that we merge in. So
Cool. It's great. Excellent. I see someone adding an agenda item, pull request 851.
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, that's the one Emily wanted
Yeah.
to talk about today.
Okay. Should we?
So
Yep. Go ahead.
So I'd added it to the GitHub issue for this meeting, but didn't realize that was not the list that we were going through. So yeah, so there's some weirdness around with the contributor covenant update from 2.0 to 2.1, but really the relevant bit here that I wanted to raise for our discussion is that effectively this has identified that we don't have a good, or we really ought to have a good definition of community in terms of the COC that we have. Right now, it's not explicitly clear in the actual language of the contributor covenant that we're using, whether community refers to the community around a single project, or whether we're talking about the whole community of the OpenJS Foundation. And this is quite important because the temporary ban and permanent ban actions that the COC allows us to take are targeting the community. So it's not clear from reading the text effectively whether we're talking about temporary bans from all of OpenJS or permanent bans of all of OpenJS, or actions that are targeting an individual project. In the conversations that we've had about this, at least my understanding has been that in terms of these actions, our intent is to talk about these actions targeting the project community. So the COC violation would potentially lead to a temporary or permanent ban from the specific project community rather than all of the OpenJS Foundation. And effectively, if our shared sense is this, we ought to add in add to the preamble that we already have for the COC, a clarifier for what we mean by community in this case. In general, this is much the same situation as we have for our CLAs that we have, which are the Apache CLAs, which refer to, they use the term project. But in our understanding of the CLA, in that context specifically, project actually doesn't mean a single project of the OpenJS Foundation. It means all of the OpenJS Foundation. So similarly, in this case, we ought to define actually the reverse, that community specifically refers to one project's community.
Well,
yeah,
so
that's it.
I wanted to, my understanding, so the purpose of the COC here in this section is to list possible consequences. None of them are mandate. We don't have to do any of those. We just can. So it, I think, must say that we can ban you from every OpenJS project. In no way does that mean we will or must, or that we will force an individual project to do such a thing, but we must retain the capability. And that's why I think the word project shouldn't be there. Community should be intentionally vague so that we have the widest latitude of enforcement. Obviously, separately from that, we never want to compel a project to do something the project's maintainers don't do as a foundation. Like that's my opinion as a foundation, CPC member, board member, whatever, and also as a project maintainer. But we always want the ability to do that in case project maintainers are amenable.
Mike Samuel? Sorry.
Yeah, I guess, thanks for clarifying, Jordan. I guess, my main question was like, is there, is like, how likely are we to have a circumstance where the appropriate response is a ban from a very small slice of the OpenJS Foundation, but the problem doesn't warrant, banning temporarily or permanently from the larger project? And then also for a project, if a project is a critical piece of infrastructure and the current maintainers have done something super egregious that would warrant removing the entire group of maintainers, and there's people who have been involved in the project before that could take over as maintainers. Maybe there's been some rift and one group has been forced out, and it seems clear that really the project needs maintenance, and going forward, the people who are forced out could take on that role. Should we not have this seems like an infrequent thing, but should we not also have the ability to do that kind of thing?
Agreed. I've been spending more time trying to learn more about this on the contributor covenant repo, attending breakout sessions that we had at the LF member summit. And I think the theme that I'm hearing really sort of echoes what Jordan said, is that flexibility. People are messy. It could be temporary. Someone could be having a bad day, so it should be forgiving. Some folks are saying the enforcement should be separate, and there's some movement around taking the enforcement piece and putting it separate. But I think intentionally leaving community vague was something that we experienced. We've only had one case in 2.5 years that we've really been created, and we did talk about what is your community space, for example, as opposed to even if it's a project. Is Twitter a community space? I think our committee decided, yeah, it is a community space. So that flexibility was really important. And I think what's really important too, if you feel strongly about something, I really encourage people, and maybe this is after the working session, if we do see changes, to take it to the main contributor covenant, because those folks have spent a lot of time, and it's really interesting to see their feedback. I think, Toby, you're next.
So the reason I've been pushing back on this is not because of opinions I share. I actually, share the kind of opinion that Jordan expressed earlier. However, I remember distinctly having a conversation in Montreal, one of the last in-person meetings we had in a very long time, about this topic, where there were some project maintainers who were extremely concerned and defending vigorously against the possibility of being in a position where they would be forced to ban someone without having been able to have an eye in the process of that ban happening. And my understanding was that this specific language was what had allowed us all to move to 2.0. And so I want to make sure that we are respectful of what project maintainers want, was my community hat on, regardless of the fact that I actually have a personally different opinion about this. So I want us to be careful about this. For this particular pull request, I've listed a bunch of options that I think we can do, but I definitely don't think that we can remove this tiny thing without being explicit about its meaning and making sure that folks are okay with it.
Emily?
I'm very much with Toby on this one. I think defining community or dropping the project word from it as effectively the 2.0 to 2.1 list does effectively enact a possible change that is likely to be surprising to project maintainers who may have read the COC previously, and from that drawn a conclusion that the OpenJS Foundation could not mandate for them to take an action without effectively consultation. So I would say that we definitely need a deeper conversation on this topic than this meeting is going to allow us. And either something like a working session or a session at the OpenJS World would, I think, be appropriate for continuing this. But I think that effectively this means that we need to put on hold until that conversation is resolved any changes to our COC currently.
Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to echo the same thing as Toby. Is like, we have to be careful in terms of what our projects have agreed and bought into. We need to respect that, and I agree with his assessment that in the previous discussions there hasn't been consensus that projects will just expect to be told to ban somebody or not, and that the scope was on an individual project basis. Not that we can't push or move towards that, but it needs to be a consensus building process as opposed to assuming that we can just do that.
Thank you, Michael. Jory?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, calling to mind those initial conversations from Montreal, because I remember those well as well. A lot of that came from just a lack of clarity and trust and just awareness of what the process would be like. And I think, and that's where a lot of that initial reticence came from to maybe to allow for that step. Not saying that we need to remove this. I'm not arguing for that. But what I would say is as we do continue these conversations, maybe doing some education and outreach to the maintainer community that we have, what this means in practical terms. To Jordan's point, we just because we can doesn't mean we must, do certain things. And that should be a thing that we consider as we evolve this PR in our thinking here.
And then what I wanted to add is if the foundation has the ability, I don't know actually if the foundation is prohibited from or allowed to mandate things of projects without the project maintainer's consent. I don't actually know the current status there. I know that we all wouldn't want to do that, even if we could. But if the foundation's allowed to, then the COC isn't what gives it that ability. It can force a project to ban people regardless. The COC is about communicating to the people who want to be protected from violations and to the violators about what the possible consequences are. And those possible consequences absolutely include, and should include and must include, I would argue, being banned from all related, like from every project. That does not mean, that does not change the foundation's ability to compel projects to do that. Either they have that ability or they don't. And whether they should have that ability or not is a totally different discussion. And whether, I hope we all agree that we don't want to exercise that ability, even if we have it. So I agree that those are valid concerns and they should be taken into account. I do not agree that the code of conduct affects them in any way.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. We have a couple more hands raised and then we should wrap it up and move on to private business. Sarah?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm trying my new thing of running during the CPC. So I wanted to kind of echo a few people here. And this doesn't sound like the way things are currently set up. I think the transparency part is important of giving project owners the ability to see the COC process as it goes. One thing I want to flag is that one thing I heard a few times is that the COC or the CPC should not be able to override the projects as far as decisions go. I think that the COC Council and the CPC have been very thoughtful about inclusion when it comes to, or try to be thoughtful about inclusion. I don't know how we try, we do. I don't know how we do. I'm not giving us a grade, but I think one thing to note is that if we allow the projects to override the decision made by the central body, we should ask the same from them. So if we are giving them the ability to say, no, actually, we're not going to ban this person, we decided at the maintainer level or at the TSC level that we're not going to, we should just ask that council, that body be purposeful about inclusion. And I say that because I've seen a lot of these groups and they are not. And to give them the autonomy or to encourage autonomy for them to make these decisions separate from a central body, I think that's important.
Yep, agreed. Emily, and then we'll wrap it.
Just want to reiterate my request that we find a further time, such as a working session or a session at the OpenJS World, where we, or the collab summit, I should say, where we can devote sufficient time to this question and to the questions of the COC process for us to actually conclude this discussion, which we obviously cannot do today.
Yeah. On that note, do we want to work on this further on the next working session, or I know we were kind of wanting to wait to let some things sort of play out. I don't know what the status of things are, but what do we want to do next working session?
Do we want to save it for June? It is around the corner, or do we want to work on it next? Save it for our face-to-face?
I mean, I certainly think there's lots we could be talking about, and
I do too. Yeah.
So perhaps if we don't have something else that we want to work on, then it might not be a bad use of the time.
Yeah. And I may bring in one of the subject matter experts working on code of conduct policies elsewhere. That might be interesting as well.
So we'll continue this discussion next week.
Good.
Okay, cool. Great. So let's call it a wrap on the public session here. We can stop the stream and politely request folks who are not current members to say their goodbyes and jump into the private session. I will